Hi, everyone. It's my unique pleasure to introduce our speaker for tonight's Fungus Federation of Santa Cruz meeting, last one of the season. Maya is a teacher, naturalist, mycologist, organizer, and lover of the wild. As the executive director of Co-Renewal, she's dedicated.
Sorry.
What's up, louder?
In November, I resigned.
Oh.
Executive director of Co-Renewal.
Okay. Maya's still working with Co-Renewal. She's doing great work, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a moment. So helping out with Co-Renewal, an organization dedicated to enacting effective and just solutions to environmental and social crises by working in collaboration with fungi. Definitely check out what they're doing, and she'll tell you more about it. As one of the founding members of the Radical Mycology Network, she's worked on various fungal cultivation and educational projects in Olympia, Washington, and the San Francisco Bay Area. And I'll add that 9 years ago, we had the chance to meet in the SoCal Hills and worked on some remediation work of, I think, motor oil with Plairidus. And it was a really great experience in our first introduction to each other. She works as she has worked as a campaign organizer with a number of climate justice and wilderness defense struggles over many years. Maya is the founder of the Wild Child Santa Cruz, a nature immersion program for homeschoolers. As an instructor of mycopermaculture, fungal biology, micro-renewal, and mushroom identification for both adults and children, she has experience writing curriculum and giving mycology-related workshops. And I can attest they are fantastic workshops, and you should definitely check them out after the talk today. She is currently studying ecopsychology, leading mushroom hunts with Forage SF, leading rites of passage programs with Gaia Passages, and raising an enchanted child that helps her out in the field as her myco assistant. And so Maya has turned to a number of different aspects of mycology, including our own personal relationships with fungi. And so I'll leave it to her to dive into her talk today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Will. Thanks, Fungus Federation. Thanks, everyone, for being here. It's such a joy to be back involved with the Fungus Federation. I just really believe in the power of these mycological societies and the importance of educating people and making events like this accessible and affordable. And I just think it's just so fun to just bring all our hypal threads together and fuse them and be like a little mycelial network, sharing information and resources. If you leave early, I have a little sign-up sheet for Co-Renewal, which is a nonprofit that I work with, and there's a little pamphlet there. And then if you're interested in doing any of my educational workshops or anything, there's a mycopsychology sign-up right there. So I'm gonna go ahead and share screen. There we go. I think it's all working. Can everybody hear me okay on Zoom and everything? Awesome.
Yes.
I also want to give my gratitude to the fungi themselves and all of the functions that they provide for us, to the fungi that are in our bodies. So fungi are so inherent to everything that we do. We're breathing in their spores right now. I'm sure they're hopefully not too many, because I know we have all sorts of interesting animals around us. But the ones that are helping us digest and access our food, the ones that help to the microbes in the soil that help the food that we eat to grow, and all of the ways that the fungi have supported our existence. None of us would live for 1 second without them. My interest in what I'm engaging with, especially around this concept, I keep throwing out this concept, mycopsychology, that's going to be woven throughout the talk, which is really about fire, but we'll get to that in a second, is ways that we can connect consciously with these fungal processes that are already occurring. So whether it's the fungi in our bodies, whether it's the ones that we're foraging, whether it's ones we're cultivating, how we can deepen that relationship and have more reciprocal relationships, how we can connect with them as almost like a window that opens us up to all of these aspects of the web of life, and how we can work with them for our own personal healing, and then also the healing of the ecosystems and communities around us. Because as we know, we have a lot of work to do on this planet right now. So I also want to acknowledge that we're on the land of the Awaswa speaking Ohlone people, who are currently represented by the Ama Mutsun tribal band. We're right here by the ocean, which is an important food source for Indigenous folks, as well as close to the forest here, particularly the oak forest, which we as foragers become very familiar with. I want to offer my gratitude to all of the people who have tended these oak forests for thousands of years. And if it wasn't for all of the work that they have been doing for thousands of years to care for these oak trees and care for these ecosystems, none of us would have any mushrooms to forage hardly at all. That's where a lot of the abundance comes from, is these oak woodlands. And because these woodlands have not been tended for the last few hundred years due to the genocide and expulsion of the indigenous people, we're noticing a dramatic decline in our mycorrhizal fungal species, so our state mushroom, the chanterelle. I moved here 9 years ago. You can find chanterelles all over the place, and now it's very different. And there's a lot of different reasons for that, but the drought is obviously a huge one. But a big part of that is because we haven't been taking care of our oak woodlands. I think that there's just so much that we can learn from each other about fungi. And I think we can also look to thousands of years of traditional ecological knowledge about mushroom foraging. I really want to recommend that anybody who forages in the Santa Cruz Mountains, check out this incredible paper called California Indian Ethnomycology and Associated Forest Management. It's by M. Cat Anderson, who wrote Tending the Wild, which is a really important book. And it's got just like all of these different uses of fungi and all of these ways of building relationships with fungi. So they were a big part of the story of California, as we know, is fire, right? And that's a very important ecological role of us as humans, is to bring fire to the oak woodlands, particularly, and tend to the oak woodlands. And in this paper, they talk about how indigenous folks understood that relationship and the importance of bringing fire in order to get mushrooms like chanterelles and porcinis and other mycorrhizal species. So if we want to be able to continue to harvest these fungi, we have to bring fire in a good way back into the land. And we have to look at what the people of this land have been doing for thousands of years to take care of this ecosystem. And I think it's also important to look at our own ancestry, so for me, and also looking at the history of California. So for me, my ancestors came to California in the mid 1800s in this wave of colonization that happened, where there was, obviously there was a genocide occurring. I have an ancestor who killed 72 bears. They were likely this bear that's on the California state flag, which is now extinct. And the bears actually play a really interesting role in fire. And it's a little bit of a side note, but I think it's really interesting. So a snag is a dead tree that's standing up, right? They're very dry and flammable when they're up. Bears would knock them down onto the ground where the fungi could get them and decompose them and hold on to moisture in that log where it would become less flammable. And the bears would then eat the bugs that are on that log. So that is another one of many reasons for the growing intensity of the wildfires here in California, is the extinction of the bears. Another key part of this history that I think is really essential to name is the logging. We had various waves of logging after the San Francisco fires, the earthquakes, the destruction of our old growth forests. What that does is it removes this precious biomass for the fungi, right? This precious food source that would then be made into soil. New trees would then grow up and be healthy and strong. Without that precious food source, removing all of these trees and clear cutting, not only are we, obviously greatly impacting the wildlife, which have a very important ecological role, but we're taking away the ability of that forest to capture moisture and be able to have healthy trees. So what we have now in the forest, we have all this second growth, third growth forest where we have all these really scraggly, crowded trees that don't look as healthy and they're not as well spaced. And those are much more flammable than an old growth ecosystem. As another side note here, I just want to mention that people are still using logging as an excuse for mitigating wildfire, which is just the most insane thing I have ever heard. Has anybody ever been in a forest before? Is it colder and moister in the forest or like in the parking lot or like lawn next to the forest? Where's it cooler and moister? Okay, does fire like cool and moist or like hot and dry better? Hot and dry, right? That is fire, basic fire ecology. So I would say as a matter of absolute necessity to prevent these wildfires, we have to stop logging, all logging on public lands immediately. Any commercial clear cuts need to stop immediately. Non-commercial thinning is a different story. But just need to name that as a very important piece of the story of fire and fungi here in California. So another thing that happened in our history, of course, is fire suppression, as we all know. Smokey the Bear, again, the bear theme just keeps coming up in my life lately. You know, people have this fear of fire and not understanding of the importance of having some amount of fire on the land. We get the buildup of woody debris and we end up with higher intensity, larger mega fires. Also, just to trace, you know, the history of colonization in the United States, you know, and this not only like a physical colonization, but the colonization, the colonial belief system, right? The system of domination, of nature, of subjugation, you know, men over women, humans over nature, accumulation of wealth above all else. So this mentality, I don't know if you guys can understand what's happening here, but this is, so 100% of the United States used to be indigenous managed, and right now it's 2%. And that's, I think, at the root of the majority of our ecological problems that we're facing here in this country. So the question for us as foragers, this is Veronica, isn't she lovely? Is how does this colonial mindset that like we've all been born and bred into growing up in the United States, how does this impact our relationship with fungi when we're out there in the forest, when we're foraging? So you can see Veronica here, this was, I don't know if this was that day, but on that snag there, you can see, so I voted for the Hericium for the California state mushroom. Did anybody else? The lion's mane? No? I would have actually preferred they had put on the Coralloides instead of the Aranaceus, but anyway, I love these mushrooms. This is a common, they had a big year this year. Did anybody else find a lot of Hericium this year? Yeah, they somehow like all talk to each other and they're like, okay guys, this is the year, right? So these guys were all fruiting on this snag, and I was leading a mushroom hike, and I was like, oh, you know, there's not a ton here. You know, maybe if we come back at the end of the day and if somebody hasn't found anything else, you know, we can take a little piece of this respectfully. And I came back at the end of the day, and every single piece of it was completely gone. And probably went into somebody's backpack and not like a basket where they were frolicking around spreading spores, right? So this is why, you know, people not being able to, and I would argue that the criminalization of mushroom foraging has actually led to more impacts, more adverse impacts on fungal species than legalization would bring. Because when you're like sneaky harvesting in a state park, which none of us would ever do, especially not this guy, you like put it in your backpack, you hide it, right? Whereas if it's legal, you put it in a basket with holes in it and you're like a spore fairy spreading the spores around the forest, right? So I think that this separation of humans and nature is like, oh, humans can only harm and subjugate nature, whereas, you know, and on a lot of these public lands, indigenous folks and indigenous foraging and harvesting and tending have been also criminalized, right? So I think that continues that sense of like, you know, we have to just, because people have this mentality of take, we don't think that we can actually do it in a different way. And I think we very much are capable of it. I also want to just point out, this is one of my favorite plants here, which I think any forager here would recognize, or anybody who goes off trail. I call it guardian oak, people call it poison oak. This is, I think, one of our greatest teachers for where to forage and how to forage thoughtfully and carefully and considerately. It tends to grow like a guard right at the edge of a human impacted area and a wild area, right? And it grows in degraded soil, often where people have been stomping around a lot or eroding the soil, or in an area that hasn't had a fire in way too long, or a place like that, right? And it can be tricky to identify, especially in the winter when the mushrooms are out, right? Who's gotten poison oak while foraging, right? I don't know, hardly any experienced foragers who haven't. And it's that like key, it breaks up the wall of green. So people actually really have to identify plants. They have to identify their mushrooms. They have to really learn how to see and be careful where they step. And it tells us where not to go, what needs to recover, right? It's this natural guardian of the forest. It's like, actually, this spot needs a little bit of time. Give it some space. And then also like thinking about the way that we move, right? If we take our like city walk into the forest, it's going to be a little bit different than if we step more gently and softly and slow down while we're in the forest. There was a study that was done in Germany that found it wasn't so much people, it was about the sustainability of harvesting chanterelles. And they found that it was less about how many mushrooms people took and more about how they walked as they went to go take those mushrooms in terms of their sustainability. So that's just an important thing to keep in mind. And yeah, the question here is like, okay, as foragers, how can we be building a relationship? How can we do fire mimicry? How can we tend to these oak woodlands and take care of them? And also how can we help them regenerate after a mega fire? So alongside this history of colonization is this history of mycophobia. And I think the two things are very intertwined. So I think a lot of it began in Europe, and the people, specifically the people who colonized the United States from Europe, brought with them this like witch burny, anybody who's connected with nature or getting like too spiritual and too connected with nature and Mother Earth must be a witch and needs to be burned. Here we are with fire again. Interesting, right? In this picture in the middle is a piece of Nazi propaganda that compares Jewish people to poisonous mushrooms. And then here is a picture that we've probably all seen when we go out for hikes. I wish I had the picture that they have at Henry Cowell. Have you guys seen that one that calls them plants? Oh, it's raging. But it's like, don't, so like, when you were a kid, right? You're like, don't touch a mushroom. They're all gonna kill you, right? So this mentality of mycophobia and this demonization of fungi also, I think, is connected with our demonization of the wild and has really prevented people from connecting on a deeper level. And I think is very much of this separation of humans being over nature that is tied with colonialism. So what if we tried like a different approach, right? So what if we saw ourselves as a part of the web of life? What if we saw all of the living beings around us as family, right? Like people in your like nuclear family, like, oh, they're in trouble, you help them out, right? You show up and they'll help you out, right? They're giving us food, they're giving us water, they're giving us air, everything we need. The earth still provides, right? And so if we let ourselves just be held in that web of life and we connect in on this deeper level, what does that feel like? For so many of us who have been displaced and we're not in our indigenous homelands, like how do we, I don't have the answer to this, by the way, but this is the golden question is like, how do we find our place within this ecosystem, right? And I think it might be different for everyone. We all have our different gifts, we all have our different talents. And I think that's kind of for each of us to try to figure out for ourselves. And we can look at what the animals are doing. I just wanted to include this picture. I just love all these interactions these are all pictures I took in the last few years of animals and fungi. I think there's just so much we can learn from like watching how animals relate with fungi. So somebody who inspires me a lot is Robin Wall Kamara, who wrote Braiding Sweetgrass. It's a beautiful work of art, that book. You guys have read it? There's no, okay, highly recommend it. She says, action on behalf of life transforms because the relationship between self and the world is reciprocal. It is not a question of first getting enlightened or saved and then acting. As we work to heal the earth heals us. So part of this process of reconnecting with our ecosystem is taking action, right? And again, that's going to look different for each of us depending on our own unique gifts. So is there a clarifying question? Yeah. Yeah. Yes, in San Jose. Yeah, did you go to the talk? Yeah, I watched it online. It was amazing.
Someone asked the question of, what do some of us do who are, far from our homelands, displaced for different reasons? And her response included the phrase, "The earth recognizes us even when we are lost."
Thank you. Beautiful. Great. So one of the ways that I have been grappling with these questions is with a modality that I'm developing called mycopsychology. So, again, like working with the fungi that we already have relationships with and deepening our relationship with them for both personal and for planetary healing. So, we found a lot of benefit from doing ecotherapy, from doing horse therapy, horticultural therapy. All of these things have been, just connecting with nature has been proven time and time again through, all sorts of peer-reviewed scientific articles to be really beneficial for our physical and mental well-being. And how can we also then take it to the next level and have it be a part of taking action? And it can be, integrated into the regenerative work that we do. So I'm going to get to that in just a minute. But before I do, I want to talk about the role of fungi in fire ecology. So obviously, mycorrhizal fungi are supported by fire when it's a healthy fire that tends to an oak woodland. The mycorrhizal fungi that grow with the oaks are going to benefit, like our lovely chanterelle friend. We have a lot of fungi that come after fire. Has anybody been out hunting in post? You were just out. Can we just like throw out some mushroom species that we've been seeing post fire? Because I want to learn too what people are finding. Yeah.
Very new, so I don't know a lot of names, but there's a lot of little tiny orange cups.
Oh, okay.
You need to repeat that for them.
Oh yeah, the little orange cups, the orange peel fungus.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have a lot of these pizizas, a lot of cup fungi come up after fire. Awesome.
There's like some larger brown cups.
Nice.
And then somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I saw one.
Oh, okay. Do you know what kind of amanita? All right. Cool. Yeah, Richard.
Yeah, I was up at Sly Park and they had a lot of the cup fungi, but also Sarcospira, which is a stop puffball.
Awesome.
When it opens up, it has a light purplish hue to it. It's what they call an indicator species for morel. And there are quite a few of those. You just see them kind of broken open, at the surface of the thing. So you think, oh, that's a kind of a cup fungi. It's not. It's really a stock puffball that just sits right on at the ground level, and you have to really dig it out to see its shape. And
Sarcospira is what you said.
Sarcospira.
Cool for the people on Zoom.
Yeah, actually,
The stalked puffball.
yeah, I don't know if it's really exactly what I call a puffball. It's hollow and actually it's an ascomycete. Fertile surface on the inside of the cup when it opens up.
Right.
Oh, and you should ask people to come forward if they have something to say.
Oh, okay.
So that people on the Zoom can hear it also.
Okay, great. Do you want to come up, Veronica?
Wait, where is up?
I'm not sure.
Here, just
exactly.
come.
Just stand over
You
here.
just stand over here. What have you been finding?
One of the ones that I found recently, Rhizina undulata, which was the one that I showed you, where I was like, I don't know what this is. It's a weird little wiggly thing. There were a bunch of them up in Point Reyes. That was just all these weird little bubbles along the ground. Very strange. Yeah. That was
Cool.
the fire fungus.
Nice. Any other cool fire fungi finds? I'm really just here to pick y'all's brains tonight. I'm so fascinated by post-fire fungi. So obviously, when we don't have fire, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that sudden oak death, which is a huge pandemic that is occurring in our native oak woodlands, is something that is a result of fire suppression and the buildup of woody debris has spread it. And when we have places with healthy fire or fire mimicry, we have less occurrence of sudden oak death. So it's very interesting. Fire kind of acts like fungi in that it recycles nutrients, right? And it recycles carbon, it recycles minerals, and it makes minerals available to plants that wouldn't otherwise be available. So we can just think about like the release of carbon, right? And that like when we breathe in, breathe out, we're releasing carbon dioxide, right? And that's what fire is doing. It's a very similar process. Animals, fungi, fire, all doing very similar stuff ecologically. And there's so much more to say. And how am I doing on time? So I think I should keep going. And just to like kind of recap how we got to this mega fire situation, I think is really important to bring into the conversation. Obviously, the stuff that I talked about at the beginning around just our relationship with fire, fire suppression, logging, colonization, as well as the spread of invasive plants. So we've seen a major decline in our perennial bunch grasses that actually hold on to a lot more carbon and can withstand fire and stay green all year round. And we've had a lot more of these, very dry grasses. That's another reason not to log after fire, which PG&E loves to do. You'll see that, in the CZU, they went in after the fire and they took down all of these completely healthy trees that had survived the fire. And they just on people's property without permission. It was heartbreaking. And what you get when you cut down those trees, a lot of times is they get replaced with these annual grasses, which are much more flammable than the trees would have been. We also have obviously climate change, increasing temperature, and drought. And what we're experiencing now is completely unprecedented. I don't know, I think everybody here is probably pretty familiar, but in case you're not, all of the largest fires in California history have happened in the last few years. We're going from mega fires to like giga fires, catastrophic giga fires. So obviously this is very different than prescribed burn or cultural burn, which would actually prevent a lot of these, which would help prevent a lot of these from happening. So after a fire, after a mega fire to be specific, this is a picture of Will. Where's Will? That's Will's back right there. This is in Last Chance, the neighborhood in the Santa Cruz Mountains that got just completely toasted. And it's where the one casualty of the CZU happened. It was right down the road from this. So what we have after fire is, obviously a loss of homes. Homes actually, another reason for the increase of fires is homes being built in fire-prone areas. Fires starting that wouldn't necessarily have started otherwise, and at times of year where they really shouldn't be happening. And also homes burn much hotter and much at more intensity than trees do. And I could see this, all over the CZU. And with all of my deepest condolences and regrets to people who lost their homes. And I think it's just important to keep in mind too that like it's more often the homes that burn the forest and the forest burning the homes. It's both. It's both things are happening. And so we lose a lot of human, we lose a lot of non-human habitat. Obviously, the microbes in the soil die off, and that's a key part of it that I'm going to get to in a second. And as part of that, we get what we call hydrophobic soil. So it means that when the rains come, the soil, because the microbes are gone, is a large part of it. And because of the change in the pH and the structure of the soil, it's not as able to absorb that water, and it will run off and it will cause mudslides. You guys probably heard about the evacuations this winter because of the debris flow warnings after fire. We also have a lot of toxins released into the environment. So I'll be talking about, the ones that go into waterways in just a second, but they also obviously go out into the air, and that's a huge issue as well. And obviously they're releasing a lot of carbon into the air. So some of us have been trying to figure out what the heck to do, because it's really overwhelming. And so we were, studying and talking. We had this fire and fungi study group, and then when the CZU and all the other fires in 2020 were happening, all those lightning fires in August 2020, we were like, okay, it's go time. And the thing that we wanted to address was the threat of toxic waste going into sensitive waterways after fire. So when you have a home that burns, like you can see behind us, there's a burned home. It often takes a really long time for it to get cleaned up. And in the meantime, the rains can come and wash a lot of the toxins from the burned down homes into sensitive waterways below, where they would affect salmonid species, amphibians, anybody who drinks water, would be impacted. And so it is a practice after fire to install these things called wattles and compost socks. So the wattle is the brown one that's made up, that's a burlap compostable one. I really wanted the compostable ones. And that's just filled with straw. So that's a straw wattle. And behind that, that green thing is a compost sock. So that's like partly composted wood chips and other like woody debris that's in a what we call a sock, plastic sock. And what we are trying to do is kind of level up the ability of these physical barriers to become also biological barriers, and inoculating them with fungi. So we're calling these like myco wattles. It's kind of a fun word to say. And this way of inoculating it, I think, is not as helpful as what we're doing now, is like making the wattles and inoculating them, which I think is a far better strategy than this was. But this was like kind of an emergency, like, okay, let's throw together a study. We got to do something quick. People, the rains are coming. It was a very intense few months between the fires and the rain. Yeah. So we put together this, the second ever study on post-fire micro-remediation. So using fungi for dealing with toxins. And we were looking at their ability to A, stabilize the soil, prevent erosion, look at their ability to break down polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which are very common. It's like a whole suite of compounds that are found in petroleum-based materials, and there's a lot of those in burned down homes. So fungi can actually eat, they can break apart hydrocarbon molecules. And they can also sequester heavy metals into their fruiting body. So I think we have a fairly fungally educated crowd here. We all don't know what mycelium is. The body of the fungus, right, is what grows in these wattles. It captures the toxins, and then if there's heavy metals there, they can ideally, they'll be concentrating those into the mushroom, into the fruiting body, which we haven't proven yet that they can actually always do. There's a lot of people who are like, oh yeah, just throw some mushrooms at it, it'll fix all the problems. It's not as simple as that. It's not this like silver bullet. It's not this like quick, easy fix like certain mushroom capitalists that we were speaking about earlier would have you believe. It's really, it takes a whole multi-trophic village. You know, we need multiple species of fungi. We need multiple species of bacteria. We need to be working with plants. We need to really understand what we're doing. It's not like quick fix, throw some mushrooms at it, be done kind of thing. But this was a good place to start. So this was like the launching of Co-Renewals project. And a lot of what we learned, I also have to give props to Cheetah at Butte Remediation, who did the first ever study on this and has really supported our study and is on our team. And he's brilliant and has really done a lot to get this work going. So speaking of this multi-trophic village, right? So this is a picture that I took in Last Chance. And you can see, you know, we have like these, I'm sorry, this wasn't Last Chance, this is somewhere else. Because Last Chance, it was just like everything was burnt completely. But you can see other areas where there's like a little bit of green here, right? So fires burn really differently. We had like some patchy spots in the CZU. We had some like everything, like Big Basin and Last Chance, everything burned kind of spots. And so the places that are patchy, I'm seeing coming back, right? Anybody else seeing that? Like the places where there was like some of the trees may have even survived, right? Like the oaks, the redwoods are fine. The redwoods are like, whatever, we got epicormic sprouting, just branch out of our trunks, no big deal. The oaks are what I'm most worried about because, you know, at a canopy fire, they will die. And they don't like reseed quickly after fire. So when we have this, you know, these mega fires where everything burns and it's going to take a really long time to regenerate, that's where our ecological regeneration work comes in, because that is not a natural fire phenomenon. That is a brand new firestorm phenomenon, these gigafires, where, you know, if you think of it like an antibiotic, if you've ever taken antibiotic, it like kills not just your bad bacteria that you're trying to get, but it gets all the bacteria, right? You have this like die off of the microbes in your guts. And so you would then take a probiotic that can then kickstart the regeneration of the native flora in your gut, right? Which aren't really flora, they're fungi. But we call them gut flora for some reason. So this is kind of the idea here, right? So fire, when it's on this scale, acts like an antibiotic. And what we're looking for is just the right microbial inoculum that can kickstart the ecological regeneration process. And we're looking at only fungi that are native to that area, of course, and like what groups of fungi. And of course, the mycorrhizal fungi are a really big part of this. So mycorrhizal fungi are fungi that have a symbiotic relationship with plants that plants cannot survive without. They do, I'm not even gonna go through this because there's just too many amazing things that mycorrhizal fungi do. They're so, so, so important and essential to the survival of 90% of plants on Earth. So we can all thank mycorrhizal fungi for any time we eat a plant, pretty much. Although brassicas don't have mycorrhizal partners. So the other cool thing about mycorrhizal fungi, besides helping the plants come back after fire, is a substance called glomalin, which is really fun to say. And it's this sticky like glom. It's like this little blob that is formed underground, and it holds on to a third of the Earth's soil carbon. So think about this, after all that carbon release, if we can get that carbon back down in the soil, and it's like a little storage packet too. So it's like this little rainy day food source, right? For when things get bad. And that's why, you know, if you see trees that are surviving the drought right now, it's because of the glomalin, really. It's because their mycorrhizal partners have this sticky blobs underground. And they're like, okay, you're dying. I'll give you some of this, you know, nice stuff that I've been storing up for you. All this, like there's moisture in it, there's carbon in it, there's sugar, you know, there's like all sorts of nutrients, all sorts of important stuff for the plants are in there. And for the fungi as well to be able to survive. The research that we've been doing that involves these mycorrhizal fungi started out a few years ago. This is my colleague and dear friend and mentor, inspirer, Dr. Mia Maltz. She did a study in prescribed burn looking at like what kind of microbial inoculum can help kickstart ecological succession after a fire. And now we are bringing together that work with the toxin mitigation work into a brand new study, which we are just launching right now, and I'm really excited to be able to talk about, called Effects of Microbial Inoculation on Post-Fire Microbial Community Resilience and Ecosystem Recovery. It's a mouthful, but it's awesome. Because we're going to bring together not just the toxin mitigation, and we're also bringing together the soil stabilization, the carbon sequestration, and increasing soil microbial richness and diversity. And you can see this little graph here, you know, so all of these things feed back into each other. You know, everything is connected. The microbes help the plants then help the microbes. The fire impacts both of them, and by bringing back you know, maybe microbes and plants back together is one of the things that we're looking at. Can we bring back just the microbes, and what is the best methodology for bringing them? We don't want to be spreading sudden oak death. Like how can we do it really well? How can we have a method that people can employ all over the California and maybe adapt to other bioregions in different parts of the world? Our study is on a latitudinal gradient. So we're looking, we're going from Southern Oregon down to Southern California and looking at how we can develop these microbial inoculum along that gradient and figure out like what is going to be the most affordable and easy and doable for people post-fire, because obviously the fires are only getting bigger and more intense. So some of the treatments that we're working with are like having a no wattle control, an uninoculated wattle, a wattle with just a single species, and looking at what they can do about metals, a wattle with a single species and looking at PAHs, those polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. We're also looking at commercial inoculum, which is the thing that people often use after fire. And then also using soil from an unburnt reference ecosystem nearby, which I think is a really cool tool. And I just tell you guys, I have this dream, if anybody wants to talk to me about it. I was talking to some people about it at dinner. I'm just going to keep talking about it until somebody's like, I want to take that on. I think it would be so cool. So one of the big gaps in our data there's huge gaps all over this stuff, by the way. This is like very new science, which is shocking given how severe the problem is. But one of the problems in studying megafires is you don't know where they're going to occur, right? So having pre-fire soil samples is really tricky. Like Mia could do that when she was in the prescribed burns, that was cool. But with megafires, we can only use soil from somewhere nearby that didn't burn that's the same habitat, right? So I have this idea of like, what if we had a citizen science project where people who live in fire-prone ecosystems around California or wherever else just go out and collect samples, and we like send them a little kit and make a little training video, and then they just like hold on to those samples, or maybe they ship them to us and we freeze them, and we just have that, in case that place does burn, and then we'd have this incredibly valuable data set. So yeah, pre and post fire data is really hard. Christian Schwartz has this amazing study on pre-fire macrofungi and post-fire, because he was looking at before and after. So stuff like that is really valuable to science. So I'm just gonna conclude here and just bring in, how can we be like honoring our own gifts and our own ancestors, and also honoring the ancestors of the land at the same time, honoring the fungi themselves as we do this work. And how can we really be honoring fire is the big question too. It's just, so many of us are just like, people are leaving California in droves because of the fire. So how can we like shift our relationship with fire and acknowledge that it's very dangerous and very impactful, but also that it has an incredible gift to offer? And how can we help fire come into balance with water in our ecosystem? Because obviously water is much out of balance as well here. And I really think that fungi hold this important place within that, creating balance between fire and water within our ecosystems, and also being a way that we as humans can engage with these processes and find our own place in the ecosystem. So if you want to learn more or talk more about this stuff, you can find me at mycopsychology.com. I've got a little email sign up. You can also sign up online. You can check out Co-Renewal, check out our website. I'm sorry, I don't have more pamphlets to hand out. I didn't get a chance to print more. But if you go to our website, corenewal.org, it's all there. And we would love to hear from you. And maybe I'll put in a little plug. So we are doing this very cool scientific study, and there's just so much to learn. And we have this opportunity with this incredible group of scientists. I forgot to mention, we're also working with UC Riverside in the lab of Sydney Glassman, Sydney Glassman is very cutting edge soil ecologist and mycologist, and Point Blue, which is a wonderful nonprofit that's been doing inoculum supported restoration work. So we have this incredible team, we have this study going, and there's just like so many questions, so many scientific questions that we're not going to be able to answer right away. And so right now I'm seeking support and financial and physical support for doing some ancillary research projects. I really want to bury logs. I'm really excited about burying logs. I think that is like, holds so much potential as a post-fire mitigation strategy for all of the things that I mentioned. And it's just something that we can't include because we only have so much funding and time and resources, right? So, and there's a number of other kind of little side projects that I'm really trying to start. So check out our donate page at corenewal.org, and that gives us a lot more wiggle room of like what we can actually include in our study. And if you're interested in being involved, check us out and you can sign up. And that's it, I'll take questions.
Yay.
And if people have questions, you want them to come up here to ask, or should I just repeat the question?
It's fine if you just repeat it.
Okay.
Check and see if you want to do next question.
Yeah.
I was curious, with your waddles that you guys are making,
Mhm.
are you sterilizing all that medium or pasteurizing it?
We're going to try different methodologies with it. It's a great question. I would rather not personally, because I think that the native fungi are already going to do maybe just as many cool things as what we inoculate with. It's very possible. But for the sake of science, we need to know exactly which species are doing what. So we are pasteurizing. Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, I was sort of wondering about the same thing. If you're, looking at any of these species that we know crop up after fires, like these little ascomycetes or like the unidentified tricholomas or whatever they were that were popping up after CPU.
Right.
Some
Totally.
of those things may be already doing the job.
They're already coming back. Yeah. And that's the question. It's like, which one of those can we inoculate with, and would it make sense to? If they're not growing there naturally, like, can we support them doing what they would like to be doing? Yeah.
Oh, and Phil says bravo.
Oh, thanks, Phil. Hi, Phil.
And on the subject of the different fire fungi, do you know or have any recommendations for books, readings, guides on specifically fire-related fungus? Because I think that's the one thing that I have trouble finding in all of my guides, oh, what kind of mushroom is this? And the fire ones are never there.
Funny you should ask. I'm in the California Naturalist program right now, and I'm supposed to do a capstone project. And I was thinking for my project to make a little guide to post-fire fungi, because I also have not been able to find that. And so I want to hit up people like Christian Schwartz and Monica Fisher at UC Berkeley has been working she used to work in the Bruns lab. And there's been some really amazing research on post-fire fungi happening at UC Berkeley. I would love to kind of compile all of that and make a little handy dandy guide. Yeah. Because I want that. Yeah, as well. Then there is a need for sure. Yeah.
I have a few questions with the post mushroom waste from the wattles. First question is, are you going to be testing all the different wattles for heavy metals, etc.? And then what do you have to do with the waste afterwards? Can it be recycled some way, or does that just go to
Yeah, that's always the question. So we're not testing every wattle for heavy metals. We have specific ones that we're testing for metals. Only so many resources. But that is the golden question, is what to do with heavy metal. I get asked it every talk I give on microremediation, what do you do with the mushrooms when they are filled with heavy metals? And there's no good answer, because we should really be leaving fossil fuels in the ground and not pulling them up and not polluting the earth with heavy metals, because there is no good place for them. So what we can do is bring them to a hazardous waste facility. That's the best answer I've got. There are some other DIY methods. People talk about putting it under a tree that's probably going to be around, or digging a big hole way out in the woods, but you really want to not contaminate a water source nearby. There's really no good place for them except the place where they came from. Yeah.
And I might add, in some cases, even if you don't remove the heavy metal, you may be converting it into a less dangerous form, something that's less likely to be taken up by an organism.
Yeah, totally. There are some people who are doing that. I haven't seen anything that's super applicable. Yeah, if you find something, let me know. If you find it, if anybody wants a bunch of contaminated stuff, hit us up. Any other questions? Our Zoom people have questions?
Nope, they're surprisingly quiet.
Yeah.
In regards to amplifying or colonizing with some of the native species, what's your method of kind of extracting them, or specifying, or how are you culturing that?
That's a great question. I'm not sure how much I'm actually allowed to talk about it. I have to ask my colleagues about that. But it'll look there are a lot of different ways to grow microbes. You can make compost teas, you can make all sorts of different things. So really just trying to amplify these native fungi that are in the soil. Yeah.
They're very specific to their woods.
Right, exactly.
They're very specific years.
Right, yeah. And a handful of soil has more organisms in it than all of the humans in the world combined, right? So there's a lot of stuff happening there. Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate your use of the word amplification as well. there's a lot of indigenous communities that we've spoken with who get really uncomfortable when we talk about colonizing substrates. And it's really not actually a scientifically accurate term either, you know. It's not a form of colonization, it's an inoculation and it's a ramification or a myceliation that's happening, but it's not like the fungi is like, I'm here and nobody else is allowed to be here, you know. It's an ecosystemic process. It's one phase of ecological succession when you inoculate with a fungi. It's not the end all be all of that whole substrate's history, you know. Anyone else? Yeah.
Related to what you were just talking about with colonization and things like that. Do you know if there are any larger mushroom farms that are using multiple different types of fungus within like one bed or one unit to grow either different types of mushrooms or to have like support from different species working together or things?
Right. Well, I've definitely done that in my garden, but not like, I don't know of any commercial growers doing that. I'm sure this is Mazu Mushrooms. Arthur Lee spoke here a couple months ago. He's doing a lot of cool stuff and playing around with his substrates and doing different things. He would be a good person to ask about that, but also like check out these, where's this picture here? So this is a wattle that was in one of my CZU study sites, and we had our oyster mushrooms that we inoculated come through, and then afterwards, you know, we get these beautiful Parasola oricoma, for the taxonomists in the room, the golden-haired incap, this beautiful mushroom fruiting right out of the wattle. You know, so it's a successional process, right? And it's not really about just like getting our one single species to grow. It's about like kickstarting the process so that everyone else can do their part of the cleanup. Yeah. Yeah.
In regards to like the best environment to grow like that diversity of species, you know, it's probably compost. Because compost
Right.
is
Exactly. Totally. And that's what these compost socks are doing, you know, and you know, they have a lot of science. I should give a shout out to Filtrex, which donated thousands of feet of compost socks after the CZU and the other fires. This guy, Brian, just like showed up, donated all of these compost socks and then helped install them, you know, just like people, it was so beautiful to see the way people came together after the fires to protect their ecosystems, even after they lost like everything, you know, some people. But I digress. Yeah, so there's a lot of science behind these compost socks as a way of doing that. And then there's also folks, another group that came after the lightning complex fires of August 2020 was Catalyst Bio. Thank you. Thank you. You know those guys? Yeah, totally. So they have this brilliant like compost tea stuff that they were spraying around. And oh yeah, there's a picture of one of the people from that company right there on the left. So they, you know, they have these wonderful brews with all these microbes in it. It's a whole, however, it is this like kind of, what we need to look at is whether we need to really have like habitat and site and location specific brews rather than having one for all of the different sites. So this was, you know, stuff that they had brewed back in Butte County, which maybe is really helpful and probably really great. But I think to optimize microbial inoculation, we're gonna need to have hyper local inoculum.
It's
Yeah.
the wood that they like to eat,
Yeah.
whatever that fungi is like. And then if you got that wood that's colonized, you know, or habitated.
Myceliated, yeah.
Myceliated.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, and when you have like a mix of microbes like these guys are making, they can eat a variety of substrates. So the question is like whether, you know, they will make it, they will live long enough.
Is it wet enough?
And is it wet enough?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that was our biggest the biggest issue with this phase of the study last year was or the year before last year was that it, you know, the fire happened in August. It didn't rain till freaking January. So we were like busting our butts trying to get all these installations in before the fire, and then like just waiting. So we waited until I actually inoculated the wattles on our study sites as the first rains fell on that day of January. So I was like, yes, just the timing. But they still dried out because it didn't rain very much. And that impacted our mycelial growth, and it made our study a lot less useful. So it's that's a really tricky thing is not knowing how much it's going to water, and it's so not practical. Thought about it a lot. It's really not practical to try to water wattles.
It's gotta be like rehydrated and pull it out wet.
Yeah, or bury them. You know, so like the standard is 6 inches for installing a wattle. I think we got to go deeper. I think we need to bury logs. All about these buried logs because they hold on to so much more moisture.
Right, and the
Yeah.
logs are already there.
And the logs are already
before it
there.
gets burned.
Exactly. You have all of this downed wood and all this carbon that needs to go back into the earth.
Handling wet water is probably not.
Yeah. Yeah, you can see chainsaws. I mean, once you have arborists that come and take the trees down, you just need chainsaws to like get them to bury it. You just need shovels. We had a lot of shoveling. That's all we had. You see, I don't know if I don't have pictures in here, but definitely have a lot of pictures of a lot of people with a lot of shovels. There's a lot of shoveling. Yeah, it's dusty. Yeah, you gotta. I didn't mention, but the hazardous materials training is a really important part of this work, and protecting yourself post fire. Obviously, these sites are very toxic, and so I don't encourage that anyone just kind of like go out and play post fire. Like, let's experiment. But please do take a lot of precautions to protect yourself from all of the particles in the air. Yeah. Yeah.
This is kind of a question that is like off the subject a little bit, but I think goes into a little bit of the work you are heading towards with the micropsychology. I'm wondering if you would be willing to speak a little bit on like eco grief and post fire, especially doing this work, and maybe how fungi have played a role in that process.
Oh, thank you so much for that question. It's something that I think about a lot, and that I really want to explore that deeper, and look. I would love to continue to explore this question. I feel like it's its own, workshop. But I can say that, one of our study site coordinators, so we had not just the CZU, we had 4 other burn scars from the same lightning fires that were all in Central California. So we had folks in Napa and Sonoma, in Butte County, and Mendocino County. So our Mendocino study site coordinator, Jen Hawley, lost her own home in the fire. And after losing so much, and I saw people also, many other people also in the CZU and in our community who just lost so much, and their way of healing was to do this work, right? And I think this goes back to like the quote here, like when when there's a rupture in our connection with the land, it hurts, and fire really can sever our having a deeper connection with the land. And it can be so impactful in so many ways. And then taking action and engaging and supporting our ecosystem and protecting our waterways. I didn't lose my own home, so I can't speak, I can only tell you what I've heard from other people, that it's been incredibly therapeutic to be engaged with this kind of work, and to be reconnecting with their ecosystems and tending to their ecosystems in this way. And I really think that, fire is transformative. Fungi are just like, all they do is transform stuff, right? They're like the epitome of transformation, right? And grief, it also transforms. And grief, it can be also like a toxin, in which it can be really painful and hurtful. But if we think like a fungus, and we just kind of explore it, and we just sit with it, we can eventually figure out ways to transform it, and cycle through it, bring it back into the natural cycles. Grief is a very healthy thing, although it's very hard when it's so heavy. And it's really something that's best tended to in community, with one another and holding each other in like that mycelial web, right? Can be a really important way of transmuting and transforming grief. So yeah, I'd love to keep going there, but I'll just do that for now. Excuse me. Yeah, well.
Real quick, gave me kind of a vision of when you're doing like agar transfers to like a new plate, and it like doesn't know what it's on because it's a new substrate, new drug. It has to take time to have
Exactly.
its feelers get out, and maybe those feelers don't go all the way.
Yeah. I have an image here. Maybe I can dig up.
I did want to ask,
Yeah.
just in general, what was something that surprised you in this, whether in the science or psychology side, for you personally?
How incredibly hard it is to do real science. I've been like a grassroots bioremediator working with and supporting scientists for a long time, but never like been in charge of an experiment before. And I'm like, oh my God, it's so hard. And I just have all this profound, respect for people who get papers published and all that stuff. What else was surprising? Yeah, I would say the incredible resilience. I'll just say this again. I kind of know I already mentioned it, but just the amazing like ecological, including human resilience post-fire. Like we all remember the CZU, right? Where there was that day where the sun didn't come out. It was like catastrophic. It felt like the apocalypse. Like it was terrifying. We were surrounded by a ring of fire. We couldn't get out. Like, we were all trapped, and it was so intense and so traumatic for so many people. And yet look at where we are 2 years later, right? And how much life has returned, how resilient the communities have been, how people will really show up for each other. We're not, like it does really seem like when you read the news, like, oh, people in this country are so divided and so mean to each other, and people are shooting each other and fighting over stupid things. And people also have this incredible ability to like come together and help out strangers and help out ecosystems. And that is just so beautiful to see. Yeah.
Yeah, seeing so many people come out to support complete strangers in this, I don't want to say desolate, but like what felt like a post-apocalyptic wasteland.
Yeah.
Really harrowing, really serious, and really intense, but we felt like a really strong inspiration. And I close to the end, but I know I've gone into it a little bit throughout the talk, but do you have like an action item for us, to get involved?
Oh, yeah.
How can we support you? How can we support the local community, extended community?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. We'll see what mushrooms you find in fire zones and help me create a little guidebook, because that would be helpful. Just like learning more, I think having a wider body of knowledge, studying fire ecology, educating ourselves on this stuff. I'm going to be offering a series of courses in the fall and through the next year or two. If you're wanting to learn more, I want to create those resources, make those resources available. I would say come write grants for us and raise money for us. That's really the biggest thing that keeps us from doing the work that we want to do, is funding. And that's the biggest barrier by far. I would say go out and make a friend with the fungus, and build a relationship and see what you can do to support your local mushrooms. Like if you go out hunting, like what can you do to help out? Those guys are struggling right now. And we can, one cool resource I should mention is Sudden Oak Life and traditional ecological knowledge. There's also a woman named Allie Meters Knight, who's doing a lot of there's a lot of wonderful Amamuts and, oh, support the Amamuts and Land Trust. You can talk to Michelle here, who works with the Amamutsun Tribal Band and the Amamutsun Land Trust. We don't have a land tax here, but we are on their land. And so I feel like the least we can do is, you know, pay some amount of our income to support the work that they're doing to bring fire back to the land and to bring back traditional ecological knowledge, so that we can learn how to live here in a good way. So I'd say, yeah, supporting the work that they're doing is a really, really key part of this. They also have volunteer days. What's that? Amamutsun Tribal Band. And the Amamutsun. Do you want to say anything about it? Or how people could support the tribe? Or?
You can go to the Amamutsun Land Trust website, which I think is just amamutsunlandtrust.org. Find more information there, or I can talk to anybody after, talk to if you want more information.
Cool. Thanks. And they have like, they're still doing volunteer days, right? I believe. Yeah.
The tribal band's
Oh,
website.
yeah. Yeah. Anybody else have an action item they want to plug? Join the Fungus Federation, pay the $25. No, only 20, yeah, 20, the last day you can do it for $20. So
And if
today's
you
the
get up
day.
early in the morning, you can do it tomorrow, because I probably won't get up that early.
Also there's the, do you want to say anything about Sergeant Corey and the Eurostack? It's another great action item.
Sure, the Amamutsun are leading an effort with many different environmental organizations to resist the building of a sand and gravel mine just along the Paparo, south of Gilroy. So you can find information here or at Protect Eurostack. Eurostack is the name of the land, which is a sacred site for the Amamutsun. Yeah, find more information there.
I think that's it. Yeah. Thank you all so much. It was such a joy to be here with you all. Thank you. Bye, Zoom people.